Hello again. Welcome to another episode of VT Grade with the theme Ranting Pedagogue. Today we have another guest speaker, which I'll introduce in a little bit, but wanted to share probably for those that do not know what VT Grade is. It's an association or a group of grad students that want to help other grad students that have a passion for teaching or improving their teaching skills. And we share resources and we share workshops and so many other good things, so you should check it out in the link below. And also the opinions that we will express here are our own opinions and they do not reflect VT Grade. So today my guest is Rhea John. Rhea is a grad student here in Virginia Tech, and I would like her to introduce herself. So please share a bit of your background, academic background, your experiences, and how you came here at Virginia Tech.
Thank you for the introduction, Jonilda. Hi everybody, my name is Rhea John. I'm a second year PhD student in the Munson Lab in the Department of Biomedical Engineering. My research primarily focuses on studying the interstitial fluid flow in the brain. So I look at the fluid flow in the brain and how it affects Alzheimer's disease and pediatric brain cancer. So that's what I primarily work on. I had a very interesting journey to VT. I met my advisor in the lab at a conference, and and they really liked my work, and that's how I eventually transitioned to VT. But it's been a great experience so far. I'm very happy to be here and share my opinions with everybody. So yeah, let's get started. Let's do this.
So you mentioned a bit in your background when we started talking together that you have a very diverse background. Do you want to talk a little bit about your journey, like how you decided of shifting major, like how hard is it, what advices you have for grad students that are in the same path?
Yeah, of course. So I started by doing my undergrad in electronics and communications engineering, which is vastly different from what I do now. So I was always interested in the molecular biology and like the cancer cell and the genetic editing and like genetics basically. And I kind of wanted to do something where I would find my way back. I come from India, and biomedical engineering is not a very popular major there. So I took something where I could find various multidisciplinary approaches and applications. So electronics is something which is like applied everywhere. So I went ahead with electronics, and my final year, like my senior year project, was actually a biomedical project. So we designed a spine posture correction device, and that's what eventually I used that project to eventually map my way into like biomedical. So then I did my master's in biomedical engineering, and I absolutely loved it. And my first semester into it, I felt like this is exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. So yeah, that's how I eventually found my way here.
That's amazing. Like this is very impactful research. I mean, when you talk about buildings like skeletons and like helping people.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, I think, in our conversation that you have to transition between campuses.
Yes, that's true.
In Virginia Tech.
That is true.
I mean, we are here in Blacksburg campuses, and most of the resources I think are like centralized in this campus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does that look for you? What does that mean for you? Is it like challenging, going back and forth? Do you have like same resources in other campuses? What does a student in another campus look like?
Mm-hmm. So that's actually a very good question, and I feel like the commute between two campuses is not something a lot of PhD students face, but I feel like a good number of biomedical students face it because the research institute, the Phelan Biomedical Research Institute, which is where my lab is, or the Munson lab is, has a lot more resources than we did here, probably because of the more amount of space that we have, and it's just easier to have like bigger equipment and more like specialized things. So in terms of commute, I live in Blacksburg. I used to live in Roanoke, but a lot of my friends and the Indian community that I'm an integral part of is here, so I live in Blacksburg because I'd like to be close to my friends. But I do have to commute every day. I think it was really challenging and tiring in the beginning when I started doing this commute, but now I've gotten used to it quite a bit.
See.
Yeah, so I think what really helps is like to start my day, I listen to a podcast, like a brain cancer podcast or an Alzheimer's disease podcast on the way. And on the way back, I listen to some music. So that kind of helps me wind down. And yeah, I feel like this 45 minutes, it's a 45-minute commute. I know the number exactly now because I've taken that route so many times. I use that as my me time. So, it's away from everything because I physically can't be on the phone and I have to just drive. So I think it's not too bad. It's not too bad as like people think it is.
So you
Yeah.
usually like drive, or
Yeah,
you
I
take the
use
bus?
I've taken the bus, frankly, very rarely. I think it's a great option that VT provides. Like the Smartway Express is a great option. It's just that sometimes, especially like I run a lot of long experiments.
Also, you like
Yeah.
your hours are not
Yeah, so I can't predict
defined.
my
I
hours,
see.
and I also don't want to be stranded in Roanoke. If like I miss the last bus or something like that, like I can drive down late, but so I don't want to be stranded. So which is why I usually take my car. Yeah, but on the days when like I'm doing something like not remote work, sorry, like data analysis,
Mhm.
or say something on my laptop or my desktop, I go by the bus. Yeah.
So you use that time to. I think the bus is like pretty convenient to kind of like try to work or do something. Do you?
Sometimes people do. I'm not a fan of working like in anything moving. Like, say, there are people who work in a plane ride or like they work, when they're commuting in a bus.
Mhm.
A lot of people do. I would probably like do some light reading, like read up some papers
I
and
see.
journal articles. But I wouldn't do like, find my statistical analysis during
Gotcha.
that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I also have taken the bus sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like if you want to go to airport especially.
Yeah, it's very convenient.
It's very convenient, and
Yeah,
it's
'cause-
kind of like the only way.
Yeah, because they have a
If you
stop
don't
there.
have your own car.
And you don't want to leave your car
Correct.
at the airport. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've seen people like do that like quite a lot.
Yeah.
So, but I get that.
Yeah.
How is like, how does that impact your living standard in terms of like, I mean, we are in a student wage,
Yeah.
and
True.
commuting, especially like nowadays, it's like pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So how does living in a student wage look for you? And you said that you didn't consider Roanoke because of like community, but did you look at, for students, for example, that live there or like work in Roanoke campus, do they live there or do they do the same choice as you? Like what the demographic look like in terms of that?
Right. So, demography wise, a lot of the students, at least in my lab, live there. Like, they live pretty close by, like, within like 10 minutes from the lab and stuff. Most of them who are doing their PhD, like, they stay in Blacksburg for the first year because of classes, and then they eventually move up to Roanoke. I kind of did the opposite. In my first year, I lived in Roanoke and then moved down to Blacksburg. I think student wage wise, Roanoke is a little more expensive to live in. So I feel like the amount I save by living in Blacksburg gets offset by the amount I spend on commuting, like the fuel I spend on
I
commuting,
see.
essentially. So that was already something budgeted for me. And I'm sorry, were you asking me about just the commute part, or how does like the impact of student wage?
Yeah, the impact of student wage as well, but commuting was something that came out of our
Right,
conversation,
right.
but the impact of like student wage as well.
Right. So like, how do I manage with
Yes.
that? So I would say like, I feel like the stipend we get is enough like for rent and your basic necessities, and you also have a bit of leeway like for it, like say to go out and because well, let's face it, as a grad student you really can't be home 24/7, especially on the weekends. You need that breathing room, and you might want to take a trip close by and things like that. So I think it's sufficient enough. I mean, I wouldn't complain if they increased it. I would be happy, but yeah, it's been fine so far. I think sometimes it gets. I feel it stretch a little. If there's an emergency pop up, like my car breaks down excessively, or if I have to like take my dog to the vet more than like a few times. So I think that's when you feel the,
Yeah,
the
I
stretch.
see. So you really can't plan or
Yeah, you
have an
can't.
emergency fund in case
Yeah,
of
I
like,
feel like emergency funds is something like a good cushion is not there with our stipend.
I
But
see.
for regular living, like when you account for say my car EMI, car insurance, rent, our health insurance, like student health insurance, I think it's fine.
I see. Yeah, I mean, initially I thought like being a grad student, like stipends would look like similar
Yeah,
among grad students, but
Yeah.
then I learned that there are different stipends.
Yeah.
Like not every grad students like have the same stipend, which is like very interesting to me.
yeah,
Like based on how that's defined and
yeah,
so on and so forth. So yeah, but I can definitely relate to not being able to have an emergency fund and
Yeah.
just like covering the necessary like the most necessary things like at the moment. And you mentioned a little bit about I mean, to succeed in grad school, you definitely need like a group of people that support you,
Yeah.
emotional support.
yeah.
And I just wanted to ask like how that looks like for you.
Right.
Is it family? Is it friends? You mentioned that you moved to be part of your community
Yeah.
here. How does that community support you? What do you actually do activities-wise that you couldn't do in Roanoke, for example?
Yeah. So activities wise, I think all the facilities were there in Roanoke. The people weren't there. So I think that's why it wasn't very fulfilling for me. But in terms of community support, my family lives in India. That's practically on the other side of the world. So if I'm upset at something like 2 p.m. in the afternoon, I can't call them when they're asleep. I think having a grad student community and like for me, like the Indian community here is very important. A lot of my friends are doing their PhD in various disciplines, in various disciplines of engineering. And I think that different perspective is very helpful. I know very recently I felt like I was hitting a roadblock, and you have these moments of self doubt as a PhD student and stuff. And I called up my friend, and he and I spoke for a good 45 minutes to an hour. And he's a very senior PhD student. And just talking me through that was very helpful. So I think everybody supports each other, especially like the PhD students always look out for each other. They may not have the same, you can say, research difficulties because everybody's research is different.
Yeah.
But in terms of PhD difficulties or PhD challenges, I think it's very similar. So I think it's really nice to have that. It's very comforting you to know that you have these people that you can call up, and they'll be there for you. Yeah, and also another big source of support for me is my PI, Dr. Manson, and my lab. I really love them. Like I don't tell them often enough, but they are very supportive. They're very helpful in terms of thinking things out loud and like things out loud actually in terms of my research. Because we're as a lab we're doing very similar things. So they're very helpful in those things when it comes to mentoring me when I feel like I have too much on my plate, and they're a great lab, and I think it's very essential that you have such a nice lab and such a nice like communal feeling through it. So yeah, that's great.
So it seems like the importance of belonging to a community, it's it's really helpful and supports you along the way.
Yeah.
And probably Indian community of students here, it's really big.
Yeah, we're a large number.
Yeah, so I'm also international students, but
Yeah.
I really can't count maybe 2 or 3 other Albanian students in campus. So how would a student that really cannot find its own community here can approach building a support group?
Right. So I don't think your community necessarily has to be very ethnic. I think like I have a lot of friends who are from various countries, who are American citizens, who are from the US. And I think we all relate on a lot of things, like a lot of grad school problems, a lot of general adulthood problems, and a lot of we have a lot of fun experiences together. So if there are people from who are from countries where there is not a very vast population, I think like other people are more than happy to be friends with them as long as they meet these people. I think a really helpful way to meet people, and frankly, that's how I met a lot of my friends, is the GLC Cafe, which is
Okay.
organized every Thursday at 3:30 and every alternate Wednesdays. I think it's second and fourth Wednesdays, if I'm not mistaken. It's great that they have it. They have like coffee and snacks, and it's a very like relaxed and free environment. Um, I absolutely love it. There was a point when I used to have class in on the Blacksburg campus, which used to get over at 3:30, so I used to be there for it. And I absolutely loved like the free flowing conversation and just everybody being there. So we had kind of like become like a mini family with people from everywhere. Like it wasn't just only Indian or only like American students or only like, it was just a mixture, a very heterogeneous mixture, and it was great. So I think that's definitely something people should keep in.
Cafe.
Yeah. I miss out on it a lot now because, well, I can't exactly leave my lab at 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon to be here. But yeah, it's great to have that. I think there are also a lot of on-campus events which go on. I think VT is really great about that. Like Gobbler Fest is one, I know. So there's Gobbler Fest, and then I think they have a grad movie night sometimes. I see that in the listserv which comes out. So yeah, I think those are great ways to meet people. And I think like another very unconventional way I would say is the farmers market. Because
So you like that?
I really love the farmers market.
I love farmers market.
Yeah, I love the farmers market. I don't buy a lot of things there, but I just love walking around in the sun, like with a few of my friends, and seeing everything. And just bumping into people. It's great.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to some of the events you mentioned. I also used to go to the GLC cafe and meet like lots of people that way.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I really enjoyed, but I also can relate that as you progress through PhD, it's really hard to kind of like, especially if you have like conflicts or like overlapping work and times of the cafe, so it becomes really hard.
Yeah.
Like while you mention activities, which are way like a lot of activities going on here for sure. I was thinking, being in between campuses, do students in extended campuses have these kinds of events going on?
Right.
Like what other events are there that maybe we're not aware of, or
Right.
are they missing out that they're not part of the big campus?
Yeah.
I don't know how life of a grad student in one of the extended campuses look like. We have members of like VT grade that are from Nova campus, and while talking to them we learn some of the challenges that comes with being in a big city and being not part of the big campus, and resources that might not be there. I mean, they might see it in different way, but not exactly like they can't be part of every activity we have here.
Yeah.
So I was wondering like what other activities are going on in Roanoke, or how do the resources for students look like there?
Yeah, for sure. So I know they have the Roanoke Graduate Student Organization, which is pretty active. They do a really stellar job on organizing activities and getting everyone up and going and kind of things. That being said, I think a lot of the students from the Roanoke campus at least miss out on a lot of the activities that go on here, because here everything is very like university like, like you have the fair during Gobbler Fest and things like that, and they miss out on a lot of those things. Like they have pumpkin carving and things, and at least for me, because it's only 45 minutes away, I've always driven down and been here for all the main events which my friends have been a part of. So I think a lot of them, if they're able to, they try to be here for the actual thing. I know the med students, they have their own community with like VT SOM, and they do a bunch of things only in Roanoke. Like I think they had a treasure hunt organized very recently. So yeah, they do it, but I think they feel that gap of because it's not exactly a university, it's more like research institute focused, and like Blacksburg is the university. So I think they feel that, that gap where you don't walk around and you get a free t-shirt for or a free donut. Like that doesn't really happen. So yeah. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier. Another great way for international students to connect is through the soccer club. So I'm a part of the soccer club, not the official one through VT, but like we have a group, a couple of soccer groups that play on the rec fields, and it's not a very organized game. It's basically like if the game is at 6, it's which first 20 people show up at 6 o'clock, they play. So I think that's a great way for international students who don't have a lot of people to connect with to meet people. Sorry, I didn't mean to digress, but I just forgot to address this point earlier.
Yeah, like I also joined many organizations
Yeah.
while I was here, and there are like dancing
Yeah.
clubs and like different clubs with like different mission and purpose that they do, that like you really meet friends that way and like build your support group or your community like along the way. So I definitely like can relate to that, how beneficial it can be, especially when you like play sports and you are like all playing and casual. There's nothing to do with like I don't know, the work or like the stress that comes with it. It should be a very relaxing.
For sure, definitely. And it's not a very like competitive game where you're playing playoffs and things like that. It's very relaxed. It's not that relaxed that you're just kicking a ball around either. But it's a good balance between a very serious soccer game and not I would say, an official game.
Yeah, and you mentioned a bit of, I mean, while we talk, it just comes very like vivid to me that you are a social person. And you like attending events. And even though campuses might be disconnected in terms of distance, you are still willing to drive down and join activities, which is like amazing, right? It's like so important. Especially for mental health.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
I just wanted to ask how that has helped you with mental health. It's such a big topic. I mean, we can like think of, let's say, a student spending most of his time in lab, isolated, not really like connected with other support groups, and at the same time all the challenges like that come with it. And not being able to even like attend certain events because of staying in the lab for so long and having to be there. So like what suggestion would you have, besides some of the things you shared that you have done that have helped you? How can other students actually find their support groups or like build their support?
Right. So I feel like mental health is something which is not addressed enough, and despite how much people are talking about it these days, it's still overviewed as a taboo topic. I feel like when I was living in Roanoke, and this is just my opinion, not the opinion of everybody who lives in Roanoke. A lot of my lab members actually really like living there, but this is solely my opinion. I felt very isolated from the entire grad community, all the grad students. I feel like I felt very like isolated, as in I felt very like tucked away from whatever was going on at VT. I also felt like really unsafe because Roanoke is not the safest city, with a lot of like, you don't exactly want to walk your dog at 10 p.m. and hear gunshots like a few feet away. So it was, that thing that if something happens, there's nobody around who I can call, and, things like that. And, so I think it was a lot of factors which were put together that influenced my decision to move to Blacksburg. I think I'm digressing, but I missed your...
No,
you might reiterating your question.
Yeah, so basic was like, what suggestion would you have for students that probably are struggling with mental health? Like, how can they start building their support network?
I think it's very important to find what works for you. So a lot of people, especially who are more on the introverted side, like for them, they like to be in their own environment, like with a book or a movie, and doing things like painting and stuff. For me, I'm a very extroverted person. I'm a very social person. So for me, it matters to be around people who I can call up at any time and say, hey, let's go grab a drink, or let's go out for a burger or something like that. And I feel like I didn't find that in Roanoke. Um, yeah, so it's not about anybody personally or whatever. I just felt like that wasn't there. It was missing. And I definitely have it now in Blacksburg. So it was like it came at the cost of me having to commute every day, which is like you can say the price I was willing to pay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see.
But I think my mental health definitely took a dip when I was living in Roanoke, just because I felt so isolated. So it wasn't anybody or who did anything to me. Like nobody did something that caused this, but I think it was just that feeling of knowing what was going on and like not being able to be a part of it. So there's this very common term now called fear of missing out,
Yeah.
FOMO, which I had a big amount of always. Honestly, a lot of my friends who I became friends with here at VT were really nice enough to let me drive down and stay the weekend, and I would go back like on Sunday afternoon or something. So a major part of the first semester when I was in Roanoke was taken out that way, where I would drive down, I would stay like on either Friday night or Saturday night or whatever, and then I would drive back the next day. And some of them were so sweet and accommodating. They even were like, I said I can't come because I have a dog, and they were like, well, bring your dog.
Mhm.
So I would get my dog up, and we would all just hang out and just be together. So yeah.
And does the campus there have like health resources, counseling resources?
Yeah, they
For
do. They do.
residents.
They are very well equipped in terms of like career counseling resources, mental health counseling, whatever is essential and things like that. I haven't necessarily used a lot of that, but they do have it. It's very they're very accommodating about student schedules and how would they like to address issues, whether it would be via Zoom or whether it would be in person. So they're very accommodating about it. Yeah.
Uh, you also mentioned a bit about being an international student.
Yeah.
And how all this is all pictured.
Yeah.
So, what challenges have you faced being an international student? Maybe in this country
Hmm.
or maybe in this campus?
Yeah.
Um,
So
or what do you hear from other students as well? What would be like some of the challenges?
yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, and I think different people have varied experiences in terms of being international students. Um, I think as an international student, I definitely miss my family and friends back home a lot. And even if there is like a long weekend, a lot of students in the US, even if it's something like 4 days, like Thanksgiving break, etc., they're able to fly back home, whether even if it's on the opposite coast. But as an international student, it's on an average it's a 26 or a 27 plane ride, hour plane ride to India. So I can't really jump on that anytime I miss home. It's a lot of planning, like out your leave and booking tickets in advance. I miss a lot of the small moments, like Easter just went by, and I missed out on that with my family. I miss my sisters and my dad's birthday, like nearly for the last 4 years now. I've missed it. So a lot of things like that. I think what really helps is that technology has advanced a lot now, so you're able to video call, and it's like there's no time limit on how long you can like talk for. So I think that really helps that I'm able to freely talk to them every day, and I talk to them at a very certain time where my family tries to keep themselves available no matter what at that time, and I stay available. So that really helps me because I know like what's going on at home, back home, day to day, and they know what's going on with me day to day. So I think that's nice. Um, that being said, it's also my 4th year in the US. I feel like if I wasn't an international student so far away from home, I would have never learned how to cook. I would have, yeah, if you knew the person I was before I moved, I was somebody who probably couldn't make instant noodles. I actually learned that very recently, thanks to a friend. But yeah, I couldn't even make instant noodles. But yeah, you gotta learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. I mean, there are challenges that come with it, and
Yeah.
as you grow, and you experience growth not only
Mhm.
professionally but personally too,
Yeah.
you develop new skills like cooking.
Yeah. Cooking is a very underrated skill.
Yeah,
It is.
that's true. I just wanted to like shift gear a bit
Mhm.
on the GA experience, like
Right.
being a grad student and being on an assistantship.
Mhm.
What's your experience with teaching or mentoring? Because you
Yeah.
mentioned the lab, I'm assuming there is some mentoring going
Yeah.
on there.
Yeah.
So, like, what has been your experience so far? What do you actually do, or have you taught or mentored certain courses or students or labs?
Yeah. So I think that's a question which by the end of grad school, every grad student has an answer for. So I haven't done any formal teaching at Virginia Tech, but I did do it at my previous university. I was a grader slash TA for a junior year biology class. So it wasn't too difficult because it used to be for a few hours in a week, and then I had grading which I could do anywhere. And a lot of it was actually in the spring 2020 semester, which is when COVID hit in the middle, so everything transitioned online. So yeah, so I was one of those you can say those teaching assistants who faced that online transition, and you're navigating Zoom, and you have sometimes undergrads are in that mood to like Zoom bomb and pull various pranks and things like that. So it was fine. I think I definitely prefer like in-person teaching because I like to be able to ask questions and not be limited by a screen. So yeah, so I didn't, and after that I didn't formally teach classes a lot. It was more of mentoring. I mentored one student in my previous lab with my in my previous university. I think I taught him everything from like it was literally like he came to me like a toddler in the field of biomedical engineering, and I taught him everything from how to culture cells to how to run a flow cytometer and things like that. And yeah, it's very fulfilling because he will call me at like every accomplishment and be like, yeah, I got a PhD offer and I got this, and what do you think about I got these two offers from these two places, what do you feel? And it's very fulfilling to know that you help that person be where they are. So that's the part I really like about teaching. And he was a great student. He was absolutely, I have no doubts he will be a brilliant scientist. I am mentoring two students currently. Um, and I think right now my mentorship is not teaching them a formal class with like defined material. It's just teaching them skills and how to go about the basics. And I was taught, so I do a lot of cell culture work. To give you a small background, I do a lot of mammalian cell culture work. And the way I was taught was really helpful. So I was basically told to like treat my cells as if they were a pet. You have to feed them, you have to look at them, you have to check on them, and that's how I teach my students. So I think they understand very well when I teach them that way because I understood very well when I was taught that way. So yeah, that's how I go about it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thanks.
Like, I was curious because you mentioned labs and you also mentioned that you would prefer teaching in person.
Mhm.
Did you take courses or labs during COVID time that were supposed to be in person,
Yeah.
but they moved online? And how was that experience? Was it limiting? What did you think about it?
Yeah. So unfortunately, the now in biomedical engineering, I think in every school they have a course which teaches you like basic cell culture and how to count cells, how to freeze cells, how to keep your flasks. I'm sorry, I know this is a little technical, but like I have to like dive into that space
Yeah.
to explain. And I think you really need to be in person for that Like, I felt like even missing one of those sessions would, really throw you in, like, oh, what am I doing now? Why are we doing this? So for us, when that in-person experience moved to an online setting, because it was in spring 2020, I think that's when, it really hampered my learning. Yeah, so uh, for example, you're shown like a video of how to do it, and you're shown a recording of how someone does it. But I'm not holding that centrifuge tube, so I have no idea how it feels. I have no idea that you should loosen the cap a little before you start, for example. So I think that was one of the most difficult things to overcome, because when I went to a different lab for like to start on my research work, I had no idea what to do with a vial of cells.
Wow.
Like, yeah, I had that theoretical knowledge of what you need to do, but I had no idea how to apply it. So I think at least in my field, in like biomedical engineering or anything like molecular biology or chemistry related, you have to have in-person mentorship, like to the point where you have to hover around that student's head and watch the way they remove things, because something I've learned the hard way is it's very difficult to unlearn something.
Correct, yeah.
So if you learn it, you need to learn it right the first time, because unlearning something is a very difficult process. Yeah, and in my field, it can lead to things like contamination, etc. So you need to learn it right. So I think virtual teaching of labs, at least in biomedical engineering, no, it doesn't work. It does not work at all.
And when you mentored students,
Yeah.
Or maybe briefly teaching them,
Yeah.
did you get a training on that? Were there resources for you in the universities to kind of like teach you how to do that process, or were you just thrown into it as most of grad students are? How was that experience? Like, how did you learn to do mentoring?
So I think it was like a mixture of both. So when I was a grader, like for it, I know all teaching assistants have to undergo a teaching assistant training. I did that for a little bit, and this was at my previous university where I had this teaching assistant training. So they taught me like a little bit of how you should approach students and things like that, and how you need to teach and communicate, and things like prepare your slides beforehand. When it comes to mentoring students in lab, no, you're not given any like formal teaching. You're just told what they need to learn by the time they're done or by the time they leave. And I just teach them honestly in the way I was taught. So I think it's just a never-ending chain of, yeah, like someone teaches you, you learn from somebody, then you teach somebody in that way, or the way you would have liked to be taught, and then that person learns it and they teach somebody else. So I think it's like a continuous cycle of teaching. So yeah, we were never given any formal training on how to mentor students in the lab. I think it's just a skill you pick up by watching people.
I see.
Yeah.
Have you had like any conflict or conflictual situation where you had to like mitigate it, even between students or between a student and you? How did you go about the situation? Like,
so you mean when I was teaching?
Yeah, or even mentoring. Like,
okay.
Were there incidents that happened, and how did you navigate that space?
Very frankly, there were no big incidents. Thankfully, I've always had like really nice students. I think there used like small issues would pop up, and things like students having a very packed schedule, and when they were available, like I had experiments going on. So I think most of the issues would be like schedule conflicts, which you can always work out. But thankfully, all my students have been really nice in the past, and I've never had to like mitigate any dangerous situation.
Yeah, I'm happy that you haven't like come
Thankfully,
across.
I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I really hope to. I guess based on what you teach and what the context is, there might be, I don't know, latest conversation that might be like a hot topic for students to get into arguments and things like that. So I've heard from other grad students that are teaching those courses that they are facing challenges sometime with
Yeah.
mitigating conflict or even just how to handle the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like as you mentioned, you don't get a training on all these interpersonal skills, how to relate to other people besides
Yeah.
teaching the knowledge.
Yeah.
There's like how to communicate, how to have empathy sometime, and
Yeah.
you know, how to be understanding, how to listen actively about.
Yeah.
So all these things that are not really like taught, but they are like so helpful in situations like that. Another question I had, you mentioned that you have had grading experience before.
Yeah.
So what kind of grader is Rhea? Because I feel some students can get into conflict situations with you
Yeah.
about grading. So-
Yeah. I think, especially, there are there are these certain students who will like fight tooth and nail for that half a point, which is not really going to change anything. It's not going to move them from like a B to an A, but they still want that point. But yeah, I've seen a lot of those. I think I'm a very lenient grader. That's what I've been told, and the instructor told me in the past. She said you could be a little stricter. Like I understand that you're also a student and you feel bad, but you could be a little stricter. So I try to emphasize. I think when I'm grading in the past, I've tried to emphasize certain things like, for example, technical terms like a different. So I don't have an example which comes to my head right now, but like cervical and like cervix are two different things. Like
Correct.
yeah, like cervical is this bone and cervix is part of the female reproductive system. So those kind of things are what I emphasize. Like if there's a test on the human reproductive system, you can't be constantly using the term cervical, like cervical rather. So I think those are the type of things that I like to emphasize on things like technical terms, units. It's fine with me honestly if your final answer is wrong. I try to like look for your working,
Yeah,
so I can give points there. I've also had students leave me very sad notes at the end of it, like, I'm sorry, I'm having a bad day, my boyfriend just broke up with me, please understand. And I think something I've always done as a grader is I've never given a 0. I feel really bad. I've always found something and given them half a point, so that at least, it doesn't say 0 out of 20 or 0 out of 30. I feel really bad doing that. So I've always given at least half a point or like 1 point. Found it somewhere, dug it out of, and be like, oh, this looks like a T. Yeah, you get a point here. Like,
Did you get any training or how did you learn to do grading? Or
Not really formal training, but just the grader who was there was like, okay, this is how we grade.
okay.
They showed me like 2 or 3 answer scripts that they had graded. I thought they were a pretty harsh grader because they had like for the slightest mistake they're taken away like 2 points. But I've also seen like graders from some of my classes. They were like really nice graders where they would try as much to give points and so that students don't suffer. And actually I remember it was a pair of a TA where the TA was really nice and she used to love to like find ways to give points, and the grader for that same class would cut points like crazy. So to the point where when we would get our answer scripts back, we would know who graded it. Like if you got like a decent score and there was a lot of like leniency, you would know it was the TA. But if someone's taken away points for that, like an S being a little faded, it's the grader. So I always tried to be more on the lenient side and like learn from the way the TA would grade. Like so that's how I went about it.
And dealing with coursework
Yeah.
and research on the labs and
Don't
mentoring student on the other
Yeah.
side and trying to publish. How do you manage all of these?
Honestly,
What are the tools that help you, strategies you have developed that are successful?
yeah.
Like how do you manage or balance? I mean, I'm not sure if balance is the right word in this case, but managing, getting through the days.
Honestly, there is no balance when it comes to coursework. A lot of the coursework that Beam requires us to do is pretty intensive. It requires you to like put in those hours, and then there's research that requires you to put in those hours. And thankfully, my advisor was really understanding when I had like a heavy course load about me not putting in those many hours at the lab and me, not being able to do a lot of experiments. So she was really understanding about the fact that I couldn't give a lot of time to my research. But I also get that a lot of students don't get that, that kind of understanding from their advisor. So there was no balance. It was really difficult because I think as a PhD student, you constantly feel that need to do your research and to like, get your data out. And you feel this really weird bit when that doesn't happen. So even though now my advisor says it's okay, but as a person I felt like no, it's not okay. I need to do that. I need to like run those statistics and show it to her. And then you have your coursework and you have midterms and these constant deadlines. So I'm frankly a lot more relaxed now because I don't have a lot of classes this semester. I just have one asynchronous class, which is great, so I focus mostly on my research. But like last semester, I had three classes which were virtual and one which was on campus. So I was like, I felt really stretched between two campuses, frankly. I felt like I would go and run something in the morning in Roanoke and then drive down here really fast for the class and then feel the need to go and run back there for something, but it's very exhausting mentally. A lab mate, a colleague of mine actually told me something which stayed with me for a while and really helped. And she said, so she's done her PhD and she's a research scientist in my lab right now. And she's a mom of 2 kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she told me, she said there are some days when you will be an absolutely brilliant mom, but you will be a terrible scientist that day. None of your data will work. All your experiments will, go through the roof and it's not going to work. And there are some days when you'll kill it at science and you'll have great results, you'll have, a p-value less than 0.05 and things like that, but you might not be able to be the best mom to your kids. And she said there will rarely be that day when you're brilliant at both, or probably never. So just, go with that. So like one day it's fine if you do a great job with the science and, you find something critical and things like that. And one day it's fine if you're, you do like a less than mediocre job at science or your data or your experiments, but you help that kid paint that sun and they're happy. So I think that's something that really stuck with me.
I can understand showing compassion for where you are, I guess.
Yeah.
And just accepting that
Yeah.
this is where you are and this is how the day went. And it's a really good advice.
Yeah, I really, like, that's something that stuck with me, that she said. I think grad students, PhD students are pretty hard on themselves a lot. So I think we really need to be taught how to be nicer to ourselves and be kinder to ourselves. I think that's important.
And what role has the working environment played in your experience as a grad student?
Yeah.
You brought this example.
Yeah,
and
no,
kind
for
of
sure.
Like made me ask, and I was interested on.
I think a working environment is so important as a grad student, as a PhD student, because you need to be able to be in that space where you can think freely, where you're subjected to positive and negative criticism, and where if you mess up and make a mistake, you're not crucified for it. Like mistakes are part of the process. So thankfully right now I'm in a very, I have a really amazing lab. It's a great working environment. My advisor is, she's more hands off, and she's like, I really like her mentoring style where it's not like she just wants to know what we're up to every week, like in terms of research, and she gives us like these little nudges in the right direction, which I find so helpful. Like it's like I could tell her what I think about it, and then she'll tell me that's an interesting thought. You can go ahead with that. Or if there is something that she sees from like her years of experience, she said she'll tell me something like, that's a very interesting thought, but have you thought of it in this way, and this could be the repercussion of it. So it's a very healthy and free environment to work in and to grow in, because I feel like if like the research is stressful, the work and the need to publish and hit these deadlines is really stressful, and on to top it off, if you have like a really bad environment, it's not going to help. Yeah. Speaking of not so good environments, I came from a lab that didn't have a very good working environment, where like there were these, oh, you have to be here by this time, and if you're not here by this time, it would be like a very confrontational meeting kind of a thing.
Wow.
Sometimes things happen. You can have a medical appointment, you can have like something come up in the morning, so I think like a bad working environment really took a big toll on my mental health. It took a big toll on my physical health, to a point where a physician, I went to get something checked out, and the physician told me, well, the reason you came in is fine, but why is your blood pressure through the roof? You're only like 23 years old.
Wow.
If you don't do something, you're in for serious trouble. So I think mental health is something we all struggle with, but when it starts hitting your physical health, like that was the real wake-up call. So that was not at my current lab. That was at a previous research institution, or previous lab rather. And I found my way out, and I'm very glad I made it to VT. But yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm happy you are past that experience and you're in a better place, because really environments that are supportive to you will be the only place where you can thrive and be your best self and produce the best work and the best results that you can do.
Yeah, that's
all
true.
you can do is like try.
Yep, that is very true.
Last question I had was, what do you think we can do better for grad students being on assistantship, research assistantship, teaching assistantship? What can we do better to improve their life? What is missing that you think this will be a good idea, or this resource, or this change?
So you mean from like VT as a school?
VT in school, because we can relate to it, but also in general. I mean, grad student lives look kind of like similar across institutions.
Yeah, they do. I think honestly it would be nice if all grad students had, I think a good portion of my income goes in rent. I think that's most of us, where a good like chunk of our income, because you get your stipend, like the first half of it, and then the first you pay rent, and you're left with like nothing then, so I think it would be nice if the housing, at least in like Blacksburg, was equally distributed throughout, where you don't have to trade off like a small room and things like that for a lower price. So I feel like if those are not so far apart, where you had to trade off on things like your privacy or like your own personal bathroom or things like that, that would really help. Also, it would be nicer if the utilities were not so crazily priced. I think and VT might be having this, and I might not be aware of it. They have like some kind of a subsidized housing for grad students. That would be great. I think they have a facility like this for undergrad students. I'm not too sure. I'm not very familiar with it, but I think like honestly, just lowering some of the rent prices, because they're exorbitant, would really help grad students. And I don't know if VT can necessarily like interfere in that and do something about it, but if there was a way like, you know, hey, if you're a VT PhD student, you get like this much percentage off. You know, even like 10 or 15% off is a good deal. So I think like if like there was some kind of a deal where like, hey, we'll get like all the PhD students to you, provided you give them this much percentage off, you know, that would be like a very viable option where everybody benefits. Yeah, I think, and I think the university probably already does this, not formally but informally, is that I think they should try and ensure that grad students stay together because it's just very supportive to have that network. So, you know, like when they're housing, instead of just looking for a roommate versus looking for a roommate you would fit better with, like 2 grad students or 3 grad students living together is a more, or like 4 undergrad students living together. But when you throw in that mix, I think that's when things go awry.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Jonilda. It was really wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I learned so much from your experience.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your experience, your advices, your thoughts. I'm sure it will be very beneficial to other grad students as well. And hopefully we'll see you in another episode.
Of course, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you everyone for watching us with another episode. And if you really like Ranting Pedagogue episodes, please subscribe to the channel, and then we'll see you to the next one. Bye.
Bye.